Good evening and a very good welcome, dear venerables, brothers and sisters in the Dhamma. Can I invite you to take 30 seconds to have a mobile phone set to silent mode or vibration mode? Thank you. We are privileged to have with us Brother Billy Tan as our speaker for today under the Dhamma Dana Lecture Series 2017. We are also very honored to have with us Bhante Punnaji Maha Thera gracing our event today. Here I will read out a short profile on Brother Billy. Brother Billy Tan is a business development consultant and a professional trainer who has been training corporate, executive, and business professionals in more than 20 countries over the past 25 years. Brother Billy is also a certified master practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming NLP and a certified Six Sigma black belt practitioner, as well as being certified in clinical hypnotherapy. In recent years, Brother Billy has conducted several professional training programs for residents and visiting monks at the Buddhist Maha Vihara, Brickfield, in the area of emotional intelligence, communication, professional presentation, public relations, community services, leadership, and management. In sharing the Dhamma, Brother Billy studied under the guidance of the Most Venerable Dr. Punnaji Maha Thera and enjoys connecting findings from neuroscience and psychology to present teachings of the Buddha from a modern and scientific perspective. Currently, Brother Billy offers talks, seminars, workshops, and professional training programs to Buddhist community centers and charity organizations. Today's theme is entitled Cultivating Mindfulness-Based Emotional Composure. Now we would like to invite Brother Billy to deliver the talk. Let's put our palms together and say Sadhu, Sadhu, Sadhu.
Good evening, Bhante. With Bhante's permission, I shall commence tonight's sharing. The topic is Cultivating Mindfulness-Based Emotional Composure. Tonight's sharing is actually an updated version of an old sharing I have been giving for some years. I have combined some findings in cognitive psychology and the techniques used to help people to free themselves of emotional disturbances and emotional agitations, combining that with the teachings of the Buddha in Satipatthana, which is commonly translated as mindfulness, but the more precise translation that Bhante has offered is introspection or introspective attention. Okay. So what we're going to look at tonight is to explore the teachings of the Buddha and realize how emotional excitement leads to dissatisfactoriness in life, which is commonly called suffering, but actually it's all kinds of dissatisfactoriness. And this is dukkha. And to recognize how we can easily get carried away by these thinking traps, or psychologists call them cognitive distortions. That means it disturbs us and makes us think in unhelpful ways. So these are unhelpful ways of thinking. That's why they're called thinking traps. We get trapped into it and we begin to think of unwholesome things or unhappy things. And this leads to various kinds of unwholesome intentions and volitions. And tonight's sharing, we're going to take a quick look at how we can apply the teachings of the Buddha to calm our emotions and how we can choose our thoughts wisely by using techniques in cognitive psychology, and also to manifest a more peaceful and happier and harmonious life. Now, a lot of people think of the word dukkha as suffering because it is translated that way, and it kind of gives an impression that the word dukkha is something very severe, you know. But in reality, dukkha has many levels of so-called suffering, because it could also mean physical pain. It could also mean dissatisfactoriness. I'll give you a simple example of dissatisfactoriness. Human beings are the only species that are the only species of animals that regrets the past, is fearful of the future, and never satisfied with the present moment. That's what we are basically. This is because when we think of the past, we start to get upset about things that have happened. Now, if it is something that was unpleasant, we are upset because it was something unpleasant and we said, why did it happen? It should not have happened. Or if it is something that was pleasant, then we will be thinking, oh, why is it over? It's all over so soon. How I wish I can get it back. So there's a lot of regret when we think of the past. And then when we think about the future, we really don't know what the future brings. We're just imagining it. And our imagination actually draws a lot of anxiety and fear in us. So when we think of things that are uncertain, we feel anxious and we get worried. Right? And then when we look around us, we are never contented. We are never satisfied with what we see. We always find things to be unhappy with. So this level of dissatisfactoriness causes us not to be able to appreciate all the blessings that have brought us to where we are today. And we are not grateful, and because of that, we find lacking in contentment. So one of the secrets of being contented is to learn to be grateful for the things that have helped us, for the blessings that have brought us to where we are today. And all of us today are very fortunate to be sitting here sharing the Dharma. So that itself is a great fortune, and we have to learn to be grateful for all the things that led to this event. And of course, I'm especially very grateful that Venerable Dr. Punnaji has decided to grace the occasion. I'm very motivated, inspired, and a little bit fearful that things I might say might not be perfectly according to his teaching. I have learned a lot from him. Thank you, Bhante. And in fact, I was actually going to show a couple of video clips of Bhante speaking about Satipatthana, so bear with us for a moment. Now, the word dukkha is often translated as suffering. As I pointed out, it could be something simple as dissatisfactoriness. It could also mean stress. Stress is referring to these physical changes in the body when hormones are released and causing us to go into this fight or flight reaction. That is stress. And it could also be distress. Distress is the word I use to describe mental suffering, emotional pain, right? Something that disturbs the mind, that is distress, often leading to various forms of depression. Right? Now, if we were to try to understand how can we cultivate a peaceful mind, how can we look at our situation and say there is so much stress, distress, dissatisfactoriness going on, how can we help ourselves? In order to bring this to the Buddhist context, we've got to go back to the origin, the beginning of the Buddha's teaching. And the very first sermon the Buddha gave was Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra, where he spoke about dukkha. There is suffering. He spoke about there is the origin of suffering, and there is a way we can end the suffering, or there is an ending to the suffering, and finally the way leading to the ending of suffering. I'm going to touch on this at the end, later on the way leading to the ending of suffering, and apply that in a day-to-day context, how we can apply this way leading to the ending of suffering, which is described very comprehensively by the Buddha, called the Sublime Eightfold Way, or some call this the Noble Eightfold Path. I will come to that in a moment. Before we get there, we need to have a basic understanding what causes us to suffer. Why do we suffer? Right? Pain is something we can feel, but why is it that we feel the suffering then? So in order to understand that, we have to go back to a basic understanding of what the mind is. The mind is really an activity of the body. It is not an entity. If you ask people, oh, where is your mind? Some people would point up here. Some might point here. Pointing up here, you're just pointing to the brain. That is not the mind. The activity inside the brain gives rise to this experience we call mind. So, in a nutshell, mind is really something we experience. And the Buddha described this experience, that this mind is an activity, and there are three parts to this experience. And the first word the Buddha used to describe that is vijnana, which is the perception, process of perception. And this arises whenever light enters the eye, sound enters the ear, and we taste something, smell something, touch something. So we experience these stimulations of our sense organs, and then we have a perception. Now we have the idea that, oh, I have seen something, I have heard something, I have smelled something. So this is perception. What was perceived through the sense organs. The second word the Buddha used is Mano, which the psychologists would relate it as cognitive process. And basically this is the process of conception and cognition. Cognition is the ability to recognize something and say, oh, now I see this, and this is this, this is that. Being able to recognize something. Conception is then to give it meaning and say, there is a meaning behind it, and we give it a label. So we create this concept of what we have seen, heard, or smelled, taste, or touched through our sense organs. So what we have seen is really a mental image arising, which is the rupa, and then we give it a meaning by giving it a name or a label. And that name or label we give to interpret what we have perceived, that is nama. So nama is the interpretation of what is perceived through our sense organs with this mental image arising, the rupa. And then at the same time, now I must point out, these processes are not happening one after another. They are happening concurrently. Antecedental concurrence, that's what it is. So concurrently, there is also the process of chitta, which is commonly translated as affective process. But I know Bhante likes to call this mood or temperament. What is this then? This is really our emotional reaction to emotional arousals and excitement coming from our sense organs. And these feelings are pleasant or unpleasant. Vedana is the feeling. Pleasant or unpleasant coming from our sense organs. And we begin to react to it. And this reaction is really tanha. And again, tanha is commonly translated as craving. But a more accurate explanation of the meaning of the word tanha is emotional reaction. When we sense something pleasant or unpleasant, we begin to like it or don't like it, and we react to it, and that reaction is tanha. If it is something we like, we want more of it. If it is something we don't like, we want to avoid it and get rid of it. Wanting more of it is lust, leading to greed, and that is lobha. And then not liking it and wanting to get rid of it, trying to avoid it, is aversion, and that leads to hatred, and this is dosa. See, lust can lead to greed. When we experience something pleasant and we want more of it, we start to want it, and that is lust for it. But we are never satisfied with whatever we get. As soon as we get something, now we want more of it. We become greedy. So lust leads to greed. In the same way, dosa is aversion leading to hatred. It begins with aversion. We experience something unpleasant. We want to avoid it, and that's aversion, coming from the root word of avoidance. But if we are not able to avoid it and it keeps coming at us, then we begin to hate it. So aversion turns to hatred. And at the same time, with this arising of the chitta, we personalize every experience. Every time we see something, we begin to think, oh, I see this, or I feel this. Imagine you wake up in the morning and you knock your hand on the wall and it feels painful. What comes to your mind? Oh, my hand hurts. Now, what's the first word? My. Right? I, me, and mine. In the same way, you're walking along the shopping mall and your good friend coming towards you, and what arises in your mind? I see my friend coming. What's the first word? I. You see, every experience we have, we tend to personalize it and associate it with what is happening inside us, the subjective experience, and we call it I, me, and mine. So this is the process of personalization, which is coming from that root word, Pali word, upadana. But that is often translated as clinging, grasping, or attachment. But actually it's a form of personalizing of the experience. Let's take a look at what I have just described using graphical chart here. When activities in the environment stimulate our sense organs, light enters the ear, light enters the eyes, sound enters the ears, and then we begin to smell something, taste something, or touch something, then this vijnana arises because of the panchakanda. Then we have a perception. Oh, I have seen something. And this gives us the ability to see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. This is coming from the 5 physical senses. At the same time, there is another part of the mind that is arising, the Mano, and that is the cognitive process. And that tries to interpret what has been perceived. And interpretation draws from memory of past experiences, the categorized memory of past experiences. Because we recognize something only because we have seen something similar in the past, and then we recognize it. And that's the word recognition. And this process of referring to memory from the past, trying to interpret what we have seen, heard, smelled, taste, and touch, that process is called papancha. And what we have interpreted is dharma, and that is the experience of what we have seen, heard, smelled, taste, or touch, and that is recognition. At the same time, whether something is pleasant or unpleasant, it triggers the arising of this chitta. Right? And then pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral sensation or neutral feelings begin to trigger the chitta, arouse the chitta, and then the chitta reacts by triggering the release of hormones in the body. So this is really an unconscious or autonomous biochemical reaction going on in the body. It happens to all of us. We experience that. Especially for untrained mind, very easily when we see something unpleasant or pleasant, the body begins to release hormones, cause us to react. Usually if we see, whatever it is we see, hear, smell, taste and touch, it causes these changes in the body. But we don't realize it because of 2 possible reasons. One, these changes may be so subtle, and if we're not paying attention to it, we will not realize it. And the other reason why we don't realize it is maybe our mind is distracted by other things. We're thinking of something else. So we're not paying attention to changes in the body. Because every time we see, hear, smell, taste or touch something, there is some kind of reaction in the body, but we're not paying attention to it. Right? So when these things happen in the body, the biochemical reactions happen in the body, they cause certain level of stress in the body. That's why it's called stressor. It causes tensions in the body. And this tension in the body is then felt as some kind of discomfort. And this is what is commonly called dukkha. And here it is a physical discomfort, physical dissatisfactoriness in the body. Right? So this physical dissatisfactoriness is a physiological disturbance, often leading to a condition called fight or flight reaction. Because when we experience something uncomfortable or the body is changing and we find it uncomfortable, we either want to fight against what we are experiencing or we want to run away from it. So it's fight or flight. Let's take a look at what happens to the body when this is going on. Right? Every time we see, hear, smell, taste or touch something, the brain triggers a message being sent to the various parts of the body. So when a message arrives at various glands in the body, for example, the adrenal gland, which is located just above your kidneys, and it begins to release 2 very powerful hormones. These are stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. And these hormones are then carried throughout the body through the bloodstream. And when it reaches the heart, it causes the heart to beat faster. When it reaches the lungs, it causes the lungs to breathe deeper or a more erratic breathing. And also increasing your blood pressure. And then it causes your muscles to be tensed up. You see, when you get excited or anxious or angry, your muscles are tense. You're not relaxed, you see. So it causes tensions in the body. At the same time, it causes other reactions in the body. It causes hair to stand on end. See, some things disturb us and then we feel this tingling sensation. Then hair stands on end. We may not realize it, but it is happening. And this hair standing on end, it also causes other conditions like the pupils dilating. That means we want to open up. Automatically, the pupils will dilate so that it helps us to see clearer what is disturbing us. All these are evolved over millions of years. And it also causes facial expression to distort. You see, when people are angry, the face is all cringed up. Or people are frightened, the face is reacting. Or people are feeling anxious or anxiety, the muscles in the face are all tensed up. You don't find people who are angry or anxious or feeling frustrated, looking all relaxed. It doesn't happen like that, you see. And then other conditions arise like perspiration and so on. And it also causes sugar level to rise in the body. Blood sugar rises. You see, all these are very, very unhealthy to the body. So we're going to learn to do something about it. In the last two sharing here at the Buddhist Maha Vihara, I already spoke about this in great detail, so I'm not going to go any further about this stress condition. Let's go further in looking at how we can solve this problem. So when we see, hear, smell, taste or touch something, right, the mind is active with vijnana, mano and chitta. Basically, it leads to emotional excitement and emotional reaction. So emotions are aroused. Now, emotions, until about 150 years ago, many scientists are unsure how emotions work. But since then, many psychologists like William James and a few others have understood the activity of the emotion. Then about 70 years ago, an endocrinologist by the name of Hans Selye, he then explained in great detail how this stress reaction is happening in the body, and that is leading to our emotional excitement. And he described it in the form of general adaptation syndrome. This is, you can Google that and get more details on it. General adaptation syndrome, by the endocrinologist by the name of Hans Selye, S-E-L-Y-E. Now, emotions are manifested in two dimensions. Scientists used to think emotion is just in the mind until 150 years ago, but since then they have become very clear. Emotion first manifests in the form of a physiological change in the body. Hormones are released, the body feels uncomfortable, and then the mind gets disturbed. Psychological change comes after. So it's actually beginning with everything we see, hear, smell, taste and touch. There is a feeling associated with it, whether it is pleasant or unpleasant, and then the body reacts with hormones being released. So that is the physiological change. And at the same time, when hormones are being released, it causes discomfort, and then the mind gets disturbed, and that is the psychological change. So emotions is manifested in these two dimensions, physiological and psychological. I have already described in great details in the last two sharing and also earlier on a moment ago, this physiological change, the hormones being released and what happens to the body. So today we're going to take a look at this psychological disturbance, how we can overcome this psychological disturbance. Now, this disturbance is again manifested with two activities. First, it is an arousal. Arousal is because of feelings. We sense something and feel something, and that is the arousal. And then there is a reaction. The reaction, emotional reaction, is tanha. And that feeling is vedana. So, with that, that's how emotions are manifested, physiologically and psychologically. So when the body changes, then there's a feeling of discomfort. This is the physiological change. And this discomfort, again, disturbs the chitta, and the chitta begins to trigger the arising of imagination, memory, expectation. And this leads us to think in terms of whether we like something or dislike something, because we have experienced that before. If it is something pleasant, now we want more of it. Right? So the liking of something is lobha. Or if it is something unpleasant and we don't like it, we want to get rid of it, and that is dosa. At the same time, we personalize this experience, and with the personalization of this experience, we begin to have this delusion of a self-centered existence, and that is the moha part. So this mind, this chitta that is arising, begins to disturb the thinking mind, the mano. So you see, there is a battle going on there. So this emotional excitement coming from the chitta is disturbing the rational thinking of the mano. And this disturbance is difficult to deal with, because when this disturbance happens, the mind begins to wander off, and that is known as mental proliferation. And this wandering off leads us to think in unwholesome way, think in unusual way, think in ways that may not be helpful. And that is what I refer to as thinking traps. Cognitive psychology today refer to that as cognitive distortions. Right? Now, very quickly, I just want to point out this bodily change, and I spent a bit of time actually researching this, because when I explain that there's hormonal change in the body, a lot of people say to me, well, the Buddha never spoke about hormones. The Buddha did. But he used the word parila, right? Parilaha. And this is commonly translated as fever. And Bhikkhu Bodhi will translate it as the fever of sensual pleasures. Now, think about it. When it's translated like that, so assuming Buddha said the fever of sensual pleasures, when you're experiencing sensual pleasures, are you experiencing fever? No. That fever is referring to the changes in the body, the hormonal changes in the body, making your temperature to rise, your heart rate to go up and all that. So this is similar to having a fever. So that word actually is being translated as fever is referring to the hormonal changes in the body. At the same time, the mind is being disturbed, and that disturbance is vigata. And this is often translated as vexation, which is disturbance of the mind. So when you read those translations, the most common books you can find out there, the sutras, are translations by Bhikkhu Bodhi, right? And when you read them and you find the word fever and vexation, realize that this came from the root word, which refers to these changes in the body, which is fever, and then disturbance of the mind, which is vexation. Okay, just to clarify that. So when this chitta arises, it begins to disturb our rational thinking. So there's two things that are pulling in opposite direction. The thinking, which is the rational thinking of the Mano, and the feeling, which is actually the emotional feeling of the chitta, they are pulling the mind in opposite direction. Right? And this creates a condition called cognitive dissonance. But unfortunately, that word actually in Pali is vicikicca. And that word, unfortunately, is commonly translated as skeptical doubt. It's not really skeptical doubt. It is the mind being torn in two directions. I'll give you a simple example. Right? Many of us, we recite the 5 precepts every day. Right? And we think of a few of the precepts. Now, simply put, the first one, do not harm any living thing, right? Do not kill any living thing. And then we go to bed at night. Maybe the aircon wasn't cold enough and the mosquito keeps coming, disturbing us, and we swat it away. Then it comes back, swat it away. The second time, the third time, the fourth time, the fifth time. After 7 or 8 times, what do you think you want to do? You want to go like that, right? But then again, you're thinking, no, 5 precept, I cannot kill. Now, your mind is being torn in 2 directions because you know you have recited the 5 precept, you are abiding by the 5 precept, you cannot kill. But at the same time, you're so angry with this mosquito that keeps coming that you really want to get rid of it. And this is what gives rise to this thing that people misunderstand as skeptical doubt, doubting whether the 5 precept is what you should observe. But actually, it is not skeptical doubt. The mind is being torn in 2 directions. Right? The rational thinking reminds you of the 5 precepts. But the emotional feeling at the time, you're so angry with this mosquito, you just want to get rid of it. And mosquito is one of the easiest thing to get rid of. It is very near your ear. A nice little clap will do it, you see. So this is the mind being torn in 2 directions. Okay, at this point, I want to point out very importantly, if you recall, we were talking about the mind having these 3 types of mental experiences. Basically, there are 2 processes going on. The cognitive process, Mano, and the affective process, the chitta, which Bhante translated as mood or temperament. Mano is actually your conscious rational thought. When you think of something you want to do, that is the Mano in action. But when suddenly yesterday's problems arises in your mind, that is thoughts coming from your chitta, emotional thoughts. So there are 2 kinds of thoughts arising in your mind. Conscious thoughts that you are thinking, which means you're choosing your thoughts, or unconsciously arising, disturbing you from your memory, from your imagination, from your expectation. These unconscious arising, thoughts are choosing you. So either you're choosing your thoughts, or thoughts are choosing you. If you are choosing your thoughts, that is the Mano in action. But if thoughts are choosing you, that is the chitta in action. So these are the 2 kinds of thoughts that's going on. Right? You're choosing your thoughts, or thoughts are choosing you. So thoughts that are choosing you is what is commonly called emotional thoughts. Right? So, unfortunately, right, remember these two words, Mano and chitta. Unfortunately, many translators, when they translate the Nikayas from Pali into English, especially the Western translators, they don't differentiate between these two words. Every time they see the word Mano, they call it mind. Every time they see the word chitta, they call it mind. And many have also said to me, many monks from other temples have also said to me, they mean the same thing, but actually they don't. I'll give you a simple little example here. There is this Chitta Sutra, right? There is this Chitta Sutra where I'm showing you here the common translation, the translation that you find in many books outside. Right? Here it is referring to the word chitta as mind. Now if you were to read this, the world is led around by mind. By mind it's dragged here and there. Mind is the one thing that has all under its control. Now if you read that, it's not too clear. Now I offer to you Bhante's translation of exactly the same verse. And he says, emotions dominate the world. Emotions create distress. Now, distress is mental suffering, right? Mental anguish, right? And emotions create distress. Emotion is that one thing to which all are spellbound. And here, realize the word chitta. So, chitta is being used. Therefore, emotion is a more clearer translation of this particular verse. Now, if you were to read this, emotions dominate the world, emotions create distress. Emotion is that one thing to which all are spellbound, which means that if we are caught in emotional thoughts, we are stuck with it, we are spellbound by it. Now, doesn't that now make a lot more sense to you? Right? That this is really what the Buddha was trying to say. It is emotion that is disturbing us. So these two processes in the mind, one is Mano, our conscious rational thinking. The other one is the unconscious arising of thoughts, emotional thoughts, right? It's emotional thoughts that is disturbing us. The conscious rational thoughts is what we can choose. If we were to choose good thoughts, if we were to choose helpful thoughts, constructive thoughts, we can solve our problem, we can bring happiness to our life. And the one verse that Buddha said this very clearly is the very first verse of the Dhammapada. And I'm going to use the popular translation first. Again, you can see, right? It is all translated to the word mind. Mano Pubangama Dhamma. It says, mind precedes all mental states. See, the word mind is being used. Now, what is happening here? Right? Every translator translate this as the mind precedes all mental states. Now I offer to you Bhante's translation. Exactly the same verse. But this is what Bhante says. Cognition precedes all experience. Cognition predominates. Cognition creates realities. And with destructive cognition, if one speaks or acts, pain follows one as the wheel follows the drawer of the cart. So cognition means the thoughts we choose. Cognition, our thinking, our ability to choose our thoughts. So if we were to choose destructive thoughts, we will bring suffering upon ourselves. Pain, distress, dissatisfactoriness, right? It will affect us. Because the Buddha used the word Mano. So now you see, being able to differentiate the understanding between what is Mano, what is Chitta, will help us understand better what the Buddha was trying to tell us. So really there are these two kinds of thoughts arising, one coming from Mano, which is conscious rational thoughts, the other one coming from Chitta, which is the unconscious emotional thoughts. It is the emotional thoughts we got to learn how to tame, how to stop it. This conscious rational thoughts is our choices in life. We can choose what it is that we want to do. Right? So, now, it's very important to realize that there is a distinction between Mano and Chitta. Now I will go on to the second verse of the Dhammapada. And here it basically says cognition precedes all experiences, cognition predominates, cognition creates realities with constructive cognition. If one speaks or acts, joy follows one as the shadow follows the runner. Constructive cognition means choosing good thoughts, choosing helpful thoughts. See, here you are choosing thoughts. You are not allowing thoughts to choose you. Allowing thoughts to choose you is the work of the chitta. But choosing thoughts is the work of Mano. So exercise your Mano. And how do we learn to exercise the Mano? There's a simple word. It's called meditation. Bhavana. When you attend any meditation and you begin to learn how to meditate properly, what does it do to you? The first thing it's trying to do to you is to help you relax your body and calm your mind, and then it begins to help you tame your emotions to the point that you finally can stop your emotion. The stopping of emotion is manifested in 4 stages called the jhanas, the first 4 jhanas. This is the progressive withdrawal of the emotional thoughts. That you finally, when you go into jhana, you finally stop your emotional thoughts. Because in order to enter the jhana, you need to get rid of the 5 hindrances. And therefore, the 5 hindrances is really a representation of these emotional thoughts disturbing us, causing us to do unwholesome things. So now I hope you are clear that we have to differentiate between what is described as thoughts coming from the chitta and thoughts coming from Mano, the two. Thoughts we choose versus thoughts that choose us, right? So now we go back to the original teachings of the Buddha, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra, where the solution was explained in the 4th stage here, the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So I offer you here, you can see a translation of Bhante's explanation of what this sublime or supernormal Eightfold Way is, and of course I also put there the traditional translation, or the common translation, I should say. Like for example, the first is right view, like samaditthi, but Bhante calls it harmonious perspective. It is not right or wrong in that sense. It is harmonious, but of course it means that you cultivate good thoughts, right? Understanding the realities of what is really happening, the realities of life. The 3 realities of life, anicca, dukkha, anatta, right? So understanding that, cultivating that understanding is samaditthi. At the same time, when you have gained that understanding and you have realized how it can help you, you want to do it, wanting to practice it, wanting to bring peace and happiness in your life, wanting to end suffering in your life. That is right. What is commonly called right intention, that is sama sankappa. But Bhante clearly explains it is harmonious orientation. You reorientate your life, change the way you think, act or speak so that you can bring peace and happiness into your life and clean and purify your mind. And the first thing you have to do now, this initial stage, what is shown there in yellow, is really giving you this initial level of wisdom. But this is just the initial level of wisdom, panya. But a very initial elementary level of wisdom where you now understand what is right and wrong, what is good and bad, what is helpful and harmful. And you now choose that you want to follow the path that leads you to ending of suffering. Once you've chosen that, the next you have to do is to practice it, manifest it in your body. And that is through right speech, or harmonious action, and harmonious lifestyle. Again, I want to highlight to you one common misunderstanding because of the translation. The harmonious lifestyle. Sama ajiva. This is commonly translated as right livelihood. Now, the word livelihood suggests that it is choosing the right occupation. Well, of course, choosing the right occupation is important, but it's not the only thing. Bhante has explained very clearly. This is not about just only choosing the right occupation. It is about reorientating your entire life, the way you live your life. To change the way you live your life so that you can live a life of purity, live a life that is wholesome, live a life imbued with goodness. And that is harmonious lifestyle, not right livelihood, right? So that you understand it more clearly. Harmonious lifestyle. Now comes and this middle part, the one in blue, this is really the part where you purify your body. Sila, or morality, they call it, virtuous conduct. And this is the part where your body becomes purified, because you are now acting, speaking in a wholesome way. Not only that, now you got to take it one step further. You have done a lot of work on the body. Now you got to do something to your mind, and that's where the third part comes in. The one in green, this is the part that deals. Normally, people refer to this as dealing with meditation, but this is not just applied in meditation, and that's what I'm going to explain in a moment. So, this part is 3 stages. I'm not going to go deeper into it. I will save it for one future sharing where I will explain these 3 in more detail. That is Sama Vayama, Sama Sati, and Sama Samadhi. But today I'm just going to focus on Sama Vayama. And I'm not going to talk about it in a meditation context. I'm going to talk about it in a day-to-day context. How we can actually apply this in a day-to-day living. And this is really answering this simple question from the title: how can we cultivate mindfulness-based emotional composure with the practice of Sama Vayama? And Sama Vayama is not something you only practice in meditation. It is something you practice throughout your life, 24/7. So let's take a look at this Sama Vayama. It is made of 4 exercises. Now I'd like to point out at this moment, again, if you look at the translation, Sama Vayama is often translated as right effort. Right effort. Now if you think of it, effort is just something you do from time to time. But this is not what the Buddha meant when he says Sama Vayama. It is really harmonious exercise. It's an exercise. What's the difference between an effort and an exercise? An effort is something you do from time to time. An exercise is something you continuously do. Because if you really want to exercise your body, you don't just go to the gym one day and then the next day no need to go anymore. You have to go to the gym every day, right? Because if you really want to exercise your body, you go to the gym every day. You don't just go one day and forget about the rest of your life. In the same way, if you really want to cultivate your mind, so it is an exercise to purify your mind. And this Sama Vayama, harmonious exercise, is done in 4 parts, the 4 harmonious exercises. And this is, in Pali, this is the Chattari Sama Padana. Chattari means 4, Sama means harmonious. The 4 harmonious exercises. And what are they? The first one is Samvara, which is preventing unwholesome thoughts from entering your mind and arising, right? Preventing the arising of new unwholesome thoughts. And this is really practiced through the withdrawal of attention. So prevention is to prevent the arising of new unwholesome thoughts. Okay. The second part is Bahana. I'll go into these 4 a little bit more details in a moment. The second exercise is Bahana. All these are 4 exercises to be done at the same time. It's not like one after another again. All these are to be done at the same time. So the second one is Bahana, and that is really elimination of unwholesome thoughts that have already arisen in us. We have previously seen, heard, smelled, tasted, or touched something that was unwholesome. And remembering these things will basically bring the mind to a state of unwholesome thinking. So we're going to learn to eliminate this, or the abandonment, through a process of abandonment. Abandoning means to give up, right? Because it's already inside us. We can't avoid it. We can abandon it, but so when it arises, we're going to learn to let it go. That is abandonment, and that process, that exercise is Bahana. And then, of course, we need to now imbue our mind with fresh, new, wholesome thoughts. Cultivation of good thoughts. And this is bhavana. Cultivation. Commonly translated as meditation. Meditation is not the only way to cultivate good thoughts, right? Reading good books, listening to good dharma, all these are part and parcel of the entire process of cultivating good thoughts. So this is bhavana. How we can now cultivate wholesome thoughts, right? New wholesome thoughts, right? Now we have cultivated wholesome thoughts. We have eliminated unwholesome thoughts. We need to continue to maintain that. And that comes the fourth part, anurakana. And that is maintenance. And maintenance is that to maintain, and not only to maintain, we have cultivated some wholesome thoughts, but we now need to perfect that cultivation. So maintain and perfect wholesome thoughts that have already arisen in us. So these are the 4 exercises. So we were to look at these 4 one by one. Right? The first one, samvara. Samvara is to prevent the arising of unwholesome states by withdrawing our attention from sensory perceptions that cause emotional arousals. Things that arouse us emotionally and make us emotionally excited, we just take our mind off it. We don't pay attention to it. You can't actually close your eyes all the time. You read it. For example, today with new technology, we keep receiving it in our handphone. We get it in WhatsApp. We get it in Facebook. Some people send us a lot of unwholesome things. And I can remember, she stopped doing that, but a good friend of mine, she used to love to collect video images of very unwholesome accident scenes where people's head get cut off. And then they show pictures where the head is really fallen off, you know. And she also likes to collect videos of beheading by ISIS and all that. And she loves to send it to all her friends. This is an example. When I receive that, I just don't want to look at it. Don't get curious. If you see something unwholesome like that, just withdraw your attention from it. Of course, when I reminded her not to do that and taught her about this simple practice of samvara, and then she realized she stopped doing that now. But this is an example. When people send you something unwholesome, don't pay attention to it. Let it go. Right? Abandon it. Withdraw your attention from it. Don't pay attention to it. Don't dwell on it. That is withdrawal. So when you withdraw your attention from things that you see, hear, smell, taste, and touch that may arouse your emotions. Right? The second exercise is pahana. And this is abandonment, giving up, letting go. Because your memory is now containing unwholesome thoughts you've had in the past. So when they arise, your memory arises, imagination arises, expectation arises, what do? They are arising. Learn to let it go. Abandon it. Right? So this is basically abandon unwholesome states that have already arisen. By letting go of memory, imagination, expectation that cause emotional arousals. That means any thought that arises that causes you to get angry, that causes you to be fearful, causes you to feel guilty or shameful, or causes you to blame somebody for something going wrong, let it go. And in Malaysia, there is a common practice that can help you. And this is the only time you should practice it. There is a Malay word for it. When you just let go something. What do you call that? Tidapa. Tidapa. Every time memory arises of something which arouses your emotion, let it go and say, tidapa lah. Tidapa simply means never mind. Never mind, let it go. Don't dwell on it. So that is really abandonment. Releasing your mind, freeing your mind from these memory, imagination, expectations arising that disturbs your mind, that arouses your emotions and make you begin to think in emotional way. And when you do that, this is where thoughts are choosing you. You see? The thoughts are choosing you. You're no longer choosing good thoughts. You are allowing thoughts to choose you. So when you realize thoughts begin to choose you, let it go. And there is a technique to this realization. It is found in the Satipatthana. Right? You realize something is arising, disturbing you, let it go. You can only do that if you start to pay attention what is going on inside your body and your mind. Why is your mind being disturbed? Why is your body uncomfortable? Right? So this second part is pahana. Now, we have dealt with the unwholesome thoughts. The next thing you need to do is to cultivate good thoughts. Bhavana. And bhavana basically is the cultivation of wholesome thoughts or wholesome states that have not yet arisen. And this is by selective thinking. Bhante calls this selective thinking. Because he runs a meditation series where there are 3 parts. Right? The the initial part, the middle part, and then the more advanced part. The initial part is really to learn to purify our mind through selective thinking, choosing good thoughts. And this is what today's sharing is about. How can we choose good thoughts? How can we let go unwholesome thoughts? So really choosing good thoughts is to think only of the good things that is helpful to you. Right? And this is selective thinking. And selective thinking is the basic practice of bhavana. Of course, you can then take it further in a more advanced way. Now, you have already prevented new unwholesome states arising. You have abandoned those unwholesome states that have already in you. And you are now cultivating good thoughts. Now you need to maintain them. And this is where the fourth part comes in. Maintenance, anurakana. This is basically to maintain. Not only to maintain, but the good thoughts that you have cultivated, now you want to manifest it more clearly in your mind to perfect this. Maintain and perfect wholesome states that have already arisen, cultivated in you. And you do this by continuously maintaining attention and awareness of prevention, elimination, and cultivation every minute of the day. And this is why this is not something you only practice during meditation. This is something you do 24 hours, 7 days a week, 24/7. So no matter where you are, you could be crossing the street. Don't do it while you're in the middle of the street. But anywhere you are, learn to purify your mind by prevention, right? By elimination, and by cultivation. Preventing new unwholesome thoughts arising, eliminating the unwholesome thoughts that have already arisen in you, and cultivate good thoughts. Right? And this practice can be done through satipatthana, which is commonly translated as mindfulness. I'll illustrate in a moment why mindfulness is not a good translation and what does Bhante translate that word as. So this is really the last part, right? And this is the part where satipatthana can really help you maintain whatever you have cultivated, right? So, you see, the Eightfold Way is this Eightfold Way is so beautiful. It really progressively moves on. When you are practicing harmonious exercise, vayama, eventually it leads you to practice samasati, which is harmonious attention. And from there, it leads you to practice the last part, which is harmonious equilibrium, samadhi. Again, the word samadhi commonly translated as concentration. It is not concentration. It is a state of mental equilibrium, mental tranquility, or the tranquility of the whole mind and body, basically. Right? And that's why this last part in green is commonly referred to as the meditation part, but it's something you can practice throughout the day. It doesn't have to be just only meditation. So the vayama, the harmonious exercise, the 4 harmonious exercises, you can practice throughout every moment of your day. It's not only during meditation. It's a misconcept to think that you only practice sama vayama during meditation. It's not. You do that throughout the day, and I've already explained. So this sama vayama is basically those 4 harmonious exercises, chattari sama padana. And then the practice of the next one, samasati, is really in the practice of satipatthana, introspective attention or introspection. And then finally, to bring this to a higher level, to lead it further on, samadhi, through the 7 steps to awakening, sata bhujanga. Now, I'm also combining what I have explained in sama vayama with samasati, which is practiced in the form of satipatthana. Satipatthana can be very useful as a kind of psychotherapy. Now, when I say psychotherapy, in Western psychology, psychotherapy means trying to heal someone with a broken mind, right? Trying to heal broken mind. People who are depressed, people who are experiencing some kind of mental condition that is disturbing them terribly. So that is the Western form of psychotherapy. But if we were to look at what the Buddha taught, and how the Buddha taught something that can be used as a psychotherapy, such as Satipatthana, it is actually helping normal people to then bring their mind to a higher level, to elevate their mind to a more wholesome, more perfected state, more purified state. Right? So very commonly, the Western world refers to Satipatthana as mindfulness. Right? And of course, they have their own reasoning and their own way of explaining. So I'm not here to dispute how other people explain their version of mindfulness. But I'm here to show you how Bhante explains Satipatthana. Satipatthana comes from three root words: Sati, Upa, and Tana. Sati means attention, what you pay attention to, what you focus on. Upa means within, taking insight. Tana to place or to focus, to position it. Right? So Sati Upa Tana simply means to place attention within. And this can be simply described with one word called introspection. Introspection comes from two root English words. Intro means bringing inwards, inward oriented. Now intro. Now, a person who is very introverted is a person who keeps to himself, right? Extrovert is the opposite. Extro is externally oriented. So an extrovert is a person who likes to mix around. An introvert is a person who keeps to himself. So introspection, intro means to bring it inside. Spection comes from the word inspection. You examine, you observe, you become aware. So the essence of Satipatthana or Sati is really two key things: attention and awareness. Right? Or should I rephrase it and say the essence of true mindfulness is two key things: attention and awareness. What are you paying attention on? What are you focusing your attention on? And what are you aware of? That's really what the real essence of this thing called mindfulness is about. Right? Sorry, Bhante, I'm going to show a video of you. So now listen to, while Bhante is sitting there watching, listen to Bhante on a video.
Satipatthana. Satipatthana is normally translated as mindfulness. But I think mindfulness is a wrong translation. We are not trying to fill the mind. Mindful means the mind is filled. We are really trying to empty the mind, not to fill the mind. Because the mind is filled with all kinds of nonsense, and as a result, we are suffering. So we are emptying the mind. And the important thing is, to empty the mind, we can't be looking out into the world. We are looking out into the world through the senses, the five senses: the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, and the body. When we focus on the things that we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, we begin to react to those things. If it is pleasant, we desire. If it is unpleasant, we hate. So we are not calming the mind. We are reacting. And therefore, we have to learn to take our attention away from what we see, away from what we hear, away from what we smell, away from what we taste, away from what we touch. So that means turning the mind inwards. And turning the mind inwards is not called mindfulness, it is called introspection. Introspection means turning the mind inwards. So the real Satipatthana is introspection.
This is turning the attention inwards, introspection. And there are 4 things to look at, 4 focuses of introspection. First one is to look into the body, and this is called Kayanupassana. I'll explain these in a bit more details later. And the second one is to examine the feelings in the body, and this is Vedananu-Passana. And the third one is to examine this affective process, affection, which Bhante translates as mood and temperament, the chitta, and this is Chittanu-Passana. And then the fourth one is how these thoughts arise, the conception, how we conceive thoughts, and this is Dhammanu-Passana. Now let's take a look at these 4 one by one. The first one, Kayanupassana, is to observe the physical manifestation of the reactions in the body, right? And this is changes or tensions and disturbances in the body, right? Temperature rising, the heart beating faster, the breathing deepens, and the blood pressure rises, and then you're sweating, your pupils are dilating, and then your face is all cringed up. All these are changes in the body, right? And that is the first one to examine what's going on. Is my heart beating faster? Am I breathing deeper? And so on. This is Kayanupassana. At the same time, there's a feeling associated with all this reaction, and that is Vedana. And therefore, this observation of this feeling is Vedananupassana. To observe the manifestation of feelings, of the sensations in the body, whether it is pleasant or unpleasant, whether it is pain or pleasure, agitation, comfort, discomfort. So observing that is Vedananupassana. Now these 2 deals with the body. The next 2 deals with the mind, right? Chittanupassana is to observe the affective process, affection or mood and temperament. This is to observe the manifestation of emotional arousal and the reaction from emotional states. So when emotions are aroused, what kind of emotional states are we carrying in the mind? In terms of fear, anger, anxiety, right? Lust, hatred, grief, sorrow, despair. So this is observing these emotional states that are arising. And finally, the fourth one is to observe how thoughts are being conceived, conception. And this is the creation of thoughts, right? And Dhammanu-Passana. Observe the manifestation of thoughts, concepts, and the interpretation of circumstances. How do we interpret our circumstances in past, present, and future? And this interpretation, if it is not truthful or accurate, it leads to mental proliferation. And this is what I'm referring to as cognitive distortions or thinking traps. We get trapped into a way of thinking which is unwholesome. So basically, Satipatthana is talking about observing these 4 areas. The first 2 focuses of introspection deals with the body, and the next 2 focuses of introspection deals with the mind. Now let's take a look at the flow chart of how that works. So when the body is disturbed with physical changes, stress, and it triggers the arising of memory, imagination, expectation, this is called emotional excitement, and that leads to mental proliferation. What can we do about it? If we are observing what's going on in the body, if we are paying attention that something has happened in the body, some changes have happened, we will be able to realize. And this first observation of the changes in the body is to be conscious of bodily conditions in terms of our heart rate, in terms of our breathing, whether we're breathing faster, in terms of tensions in the jaw, right? This is a very common area, the jaw, the teeth, and the tongue, very common. The jaw will be all tense up, the teeth will be biting at each other, and the tongue will be pressed against the palate. And that is when you're getting all anxious, excited, angry, or whatever, right? Facial expression all cringed up, right? And vocal expression, our voice getting louder, and the pitch also goes up. You see, when we're angry, anxious, or whatever, emotionally aroused, the pitch of our voice rises. That's why when you see people start to shout at each other, the voice level goes higher and the pitch goes higher and higher and higher. You see, they're screaming at a very high pitch. That's what happens. When the pitch of your voice goes up, you know something is happening inside you. And your fists and arms are all tensed up. And your neck and shoulder all tensed up. You're feeling so stressed, These are all observation of the body. Right? What what can you do about it? You can learn to pause, relax, and then think. This is what I call 3-step self-compassion. When you realize that something is happening in your body, you're getting all tensed up, don't do anything. Don't start reacting. Pause. Alright, so pause. What does it do? I call these 3 steps of compassion because you're actually being compassionate towards yourself first. Only by being compassionate towards yourself can you become compassionate towards other people. So learn to pause. So that now you're emotionally excited, you learn to pause. Don't react. And this allows time for emotional excitement and anxiety to calm down. And the hormonal reactions in the body to subside. It's like switching off a fan. When you switch off a fan, the fan doesn't stop right away. It takes a little while before it spins down. In the same manner, when you pause, the hormonal reactions in the body, they don't stop right away. Maybe new hormones will not be released anymore, but these hormones that have been released, it takes a little bit of time for them to subside. And what can you do to speed up this relaxation? That is relax, conscious relaxation. You can speed up the subsiding of this reaction in the body by relaxing. And one of the best ways to relax is to take a deep breath. Breathe. So take deep breaths, relax the body, and then consciously, right, compose the mind. Bring the mind to the present moment. And then only you are ready to respond to the situation. And then only you start to think, what are you going to do? And that is purposefully focus on wholesome and beneficial response to the problem. It's only by pausing and relaxing are you ready to then purposefully make good, wholesome thoughts. And a lot of people think that they can react right away. No, we are not that good. When things arouse the emotion, the body is all excited, any reaction is emotional. You got to pause and relax, take a deep breath, compose, relax the body and compose the mind. Then only think about what can I do to make this situation better. Later on, I'm going to show you what Daniel Goleman, the advocate of emotional intelligence, what he says about what we can do. Right? So basically, pause, relax, and then think. This think is also important. And very famous psychologist William James has pointed out, the greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. And basically, it means choosing good thoughts over negative thoughts. And another very famous psychiatrist from the past has also said something like this, Viktor Frankl. He says, we got to take responsibility for our action. What does it mean by responsibility? That is our ability to respond. So we got to take responsibility for our response. And then he said very clearly, he says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and our power to choose our response. In those choices lie our growth and our happiness. What does that mean? Between stimulus and response. Stimulus is all the things going on in our environment externally. Right? Let's talk about an external thing. Right? Somebody says something to us. Somebody does something to us. That is a stimulus to us. We see it, we hear it, we smell it, we taste it, we touch it, we feel it. Right? And then we want to react, respond. We want to respond. Now, between something happening out there and us taking a response, there is a moment. There is a gap, there is a space, there is a moment. And it is in this moment, if we were to pause and relax before we think about what to do, it is in this moment we can choose our thoughts, we can choose our actions, we can decide on what is a wholesome and helpful way to solve the problem, and then we can solve the problem. So we have this chance. Pausing, relaxing creates that space, expand that space so that we now have a chance to think. When the mind is more composed and the body is more relaxed, we can then choose what to do and how to do. Because if we don't do that, if we were to allow external influences to disturb us like that and then we react right away, we are creating more suffering to ourselves. And the Buddha calls this self-affliction of mental suffering, where he pointed out in Dhammapada verse 42, he says, whatever harm one enemy may do to another, or one hater to another, it is one's own ill-directed emotions that inflict upon oneself a greater harm. That means if other people can hate us, other people can do things to hurt us, it is the way we interpret their actions, it's the way we think, emotional thoughts, right? It is these emotional thoughts that can do more harm to us if we don't calm our mind down before we think about it. So it's really here ill-directed emotions. Again, emotion, because this Dhammapada phrase referred to chitta, emotion. So it's mental proliferation from imagination, memory, expectation arising that leads us into these thinking traps. Right? So we got to learn, right, to how we can respond to it. And one of the first thing, as I mentioned to you earlier, is observing changes in the body. So let's take a look graphically what happens to what I have just described. Then something happens out there, stimulate our sense organs, and then the mind arises with vijnana, and then mano, and then chitta, the body changes, and then we feel these bodily sensations going on. So this is a physiological disturbance. So kayanupassana is observing these physiological changes in the body. Changes in the body. Observe the physical manifestation of reactions in the body as a disturbance or reaction in the body. So these are some of the things to observe, right? Your breathing, your heart rate, and so on. So this is kayanupassana. And then these bodily sensations, right? You're feeling these bodily sensations. They can be feelings of pain, discomfort, pleasure, or agitation. So this is the second part, which is to observing the feeling, vedananupasana, to observe the manifestation of feelings of the sensations in the body, in terms of whether it is pleasant, unpleasant, comfortable or uncomfortable, pain or pleasure, and so on, right? And then comes the next part. When these bodily sensations arise, they trigger the chitta with imagination, memory, expectation arising. And that is when the mind begins to run away, falling into these thinking traps and disturbing our rational thinking. And this is emotional thoughts disturbing rational thinking. Right? And this disturbance is called distress, domanassa, causing us mental suffering. So the third part, chittanupassana, is to observe this manifestation of this emotional excitement and arousal. So let's listen to what Bhante has to say in the video.
So that is what is called kayanupassana and vedananupassana. Kayanupassana is to become aware of the body, and Vedananupassana is become aware whether it is comfortable or uncomfortable. Then another thing that you can observe while looking within is whether your emotions are excited or not. If you are angry, you can observe in your body whether you are angry or whether you are unhappy or whether you are frightened or whether you are worried. Whatever the emotional agitation, by closing your eyes you can still become aware inside. That is called chittanupassana, becoming aware of the mood. Chitta is the mood.
If we don't do that, what's going to happen to us? We will fall into mental proliferation. We allow these thoughts arising to choose us. We're no longer choosing our thoughts. And this is what psychologists call cognitive distortion. Right? And common lay term is thinking traps. They trap us to think in unusual way, which is unwholesome. And this is actually from cognitive psychology, from the research of Aaron Beck and Albert Ellis and several other cognitive psychologists, where they listed out a number of these cognitive distortions. Now, depending on which book you read and who you're referring to, there are several different references. Some people list 10, some people list 15, some 20, some even 100 different kinds. In the past, I used to list 17 of them, but now I have expanded that list to 21. I won't explain everyone, I'll just show you what the list is. You can download the list, I'll give you the link in a moment. I have uploaded it, so you can download this list. Right? So some of this is, for example, mind reading. Jumping to conclusion. Mind reading simply means we begin to imagine what others are thinking. You see, we're very good at it. We don't know what we are really thinking, but we are very good at imagining what other people are thinking. When somebody says something to us, we start to imagine what he is trying to think. Are you trying to hurt me or what? You think like that, and this kind of thing. So we begin to imagine what other people are thinking. So that's mind reading. The second one is basically called fortune telling. We always like to predict what's going to happen in the future. We like to do that. See, this is all mental proliferation. Do we really know what's going to happen in the future? No, we don't. But we like to predict them. And there are several more. Right? I'll go on. There's 4 pages of them. And the second page is, let's say, a perfectionist thinking. What should be? And we're always expecting things should be like this, should be like that. You should have done this, you should have done that. Right? This situation should not have happened like this. We are very good at thinking what should be. And then we're also very good at the bottom one, number 12. We're also very good at thinking what if. See, our mind is very good at should and what if. Right? So what if, right? This is over-intellectualizing, thinking too far away, trying to imagine things that are not. Over-intellectualizing or over-extended imagination of a snowball effect. What if this could happen? And then the next thing happened, and then the next thing, and then. It goes on, right? Another one here is we're very good at the blame game. Something happens, we start to blame everybody else. Oh, you have done this, and you shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have said this, and we're very good at that. We don't think very much about what we should or should not have done ourselves. But then there's also another extreme. There are also people who are very fearful of, who have maybe a perception of themselves that they're always doing the wrong thing. So that is the next one, right? The shame and guilt. And this is the part where people personalizing everything that goes wrong and say, oh, why am I so stupid? Why did I see this? Why this and why that, So all these are mental proliferation, the mind running away, creating strange ideas, allowing thoughts to choose us, all kinds of thoughts arising, unconscious thoughts arising. As I said, these unconscious emotional thoughts arising, they choose us and we allow them to control us. We become spellbound by it. And then, of course, finally, you have things like fallacy of change, right? Personalizing. Oh, there's one I want to point out. Number 17. Fallacy of heaven's reward. People have this expectation. They're expecting some kind of divine reward for one's sacrifices or selflessness or endurance of pain. And start to think, if something happens, if I were to accept it and allow it to hurt me, and I will be rewarded somehow in the future, And even in the Buddhist context, there are people who think like that, So this is imagining how the whole world will reward you for your own suffering, right? Your own endurance of suffering. And finally, in this last list here, there are 21 now I've listed. The last 2 are my own additions. Believing is seeing. Now, a lot of people think, we are thinking seeing is believing. That means we always say seeing is believing simply means when we see the evidence, we will accept what is the theory behind it. The evidence will reveal the truth. That's what we think. But that's not how we think. How do we think? Believing is seeing. When we begin to believe in something, and evidence arise that contradict our belief, we reject them. It happens all the time. And small things, very trivial things arise that may kind of support our belief, or we begin to blow it out of proportion. So this believing is seeing is that when you believe in something, you begin to create your own reality from what you see. And that is rejecting evidence that contradicts your own beliefs, becoming superstitious and having expectations. Yeah. So then the last one is past orientation, the fallacy of thinking that the past determines the future. So letting past experiences dictate all decision making and expecting past to determine the future, and not realizing that every moment something changes, anicca. But instead we keep thinking, oh, in the past I used to do this, so if I continue to do this, then I will be able to create something. You know? So this allowing the past to dictate the future. Now, if you are interested in the list that I have made, please feel free to visit this location, tiny.cc, cognitive distortions, one word with an S, cognitive distortions, tiny.cc, cognitive distortions, and then you can download this list. Right? So this is really coming from cognitive psychology, how our mind can run in directions that lead to unwholesome thoughts. We are allowing the creation of unwholesome thoughts by letting the mind be taken away by this chitta, right? These thoughts arising. So when these arise, they disturb our rational thinking. Disturbing our rational thinking will affect the way we interpret our circumstances. And when these emotional thoughts arise and disturb our rational thinking, they are pulling our mind in two directions. And this is where we got to practice the fourth part, right? And that is Dhammanupassana, to observe the manifestation of thoughts and concepts and the interpretation of our circumstances, past, present, and future. So we'll let Bhante explain.
Then the next thing is what is called Dhammanupassana. Dhamma is, of course we use the word Dhamma to refer to the teachings of the Buddha. But here Dhamma is not teachings of the Buddha. Dhamma is simply the thought in the mind. What are you thinking? What kind of thought arises in your mind? Are you thinking of what happened yesterday, or what is going to happen tomorrow, or what is happening now? If you are thinking of something, that is Dhamma. Very important to understand that Dhamma there means the thought in the mind. So those are the four things that you can become aware of when we do introspection. Becoming aware of the body, becoming aware of how the body feels, becoming aware of the emotional state, or becoming aware of the thoughts in the mind. That is Satipatthana, introspection. Now when that has been practicing, you have to practice it not just 5 minutes or 10 minutes or even 1 hour. You have to practice that 24 hours. That is the important thing.
So Satipatthana is not something you just practice when you're in meditation or just once a day or whatever. It is something you continuously practice. Be aware of what's happening in the body, the feelings, and then these emotional states arising and how thoughts are created, your interpretation of circumstances. And the way to overcome all this is to learn to pause, relax, and then think. Right? Relax part, you need to breathe, take deep breaths, because this will speed up the subsiding of the hormones in your body by breathing. And it will also calm the mind. Breathing is a wonderful technique to calm the mind. It will compose your mind. And then you're ready to think. Think means purposefully focus on wholesome and beneficial response to the problem. And think itself is an acronym, very helpful acronym. When you want to say something to someone or you want to do something, you apply this acronym T. T means truthful. Make sure you speak only truthful things. And whatever you want to say or do, make sure it is helpful. it can help you and help the other person, and it improves the situation for you, improving and also maybe improving the relationship as well. So THIN means necessary. Sometimes something may be true, but it is not necessary to say it. By saying it, we may hurt other people's feelings and not help them at all. So then, if it is not necessary, don't say it. Most importantly is the last one, K. Always, anything you think, anything you say, make sure it is with kindness. Right? So, THINK, truthful, helpful, improving, necessary, and kind. Now I'm going to share with you a very helpful advice from Daniel Goleman, the author of Emotional Intelligence. He has written many books on various aspects of emotional intelligence. He says that when we are experiencing stress, we're going to learn to relax and handle the stress, and there are 3 windows of opportunities. So let's listen to what he means by 3 windows of opportunity.
Stress isn't really so much in the things that happen in your life. It's really in how we react to them. And we can do something about those reactions. There are 3 windows of opportunity when it comes to handling the stress in our lives. The first is to do something to change things for the better. You know, whatever's the cause of the stress, if you can change it, do it. The second is in how you see it, changing the way you perceive what's happening. I once heard a wonderful line from a television preacher. It goes like this: something good is going to happen to you today. I love that line. That is so great. You don't know what it is. It's a wonderful thought because it allows the possibility that what may seem so bad at first has an upside, that there's a silver lining to that cloud, right? Now, if we can't change the things that are happening to us and we can't change how we see it, then we're left with a third opportunity, and that's handling the way our body and our mind react to these things. See, when the body is stressed, the emotional centers flood the body with stress hormones. And this makes it do things like shunt blood from the arms and the legs into the organs. It's a fight or flight response. It pumps up our blood pressure, speeds up our heartbeat. It steals energy, actually, from the immune system, it turns out, to get us ready for an emergency. It's what's called the fight or flight response. You've heard about that. Now, if that response gets triggered day after day, week after week, and month after month, over years, what happens is the biological system in our body that's most susceptible genetically, that's most reactive, is going to start to develop a stress-caused disease. You know, if you're a cardiovascular reactor, you're going to get high blood pressure. If you react in your gut, you're going to get problems there, and so on throughout the body. That's how stress over years and years leads to disease. It speeds up the process of coming down with the disease. So constant stress, it's like getting your amygdala stuck in high gear. Continual hijacks. We need to calm down. That's where relaxation comes in.
And that's where relaxation comes in. Again, he advocates when you are getting stressed and emotionally excited, you got to calm down first, relax, pause, relax, and then think. And thinking, he offers the three windows of opportunity. He says, by remaining calm and relaxed, we have 3 windows of opportunity to overcome this stressful situation. First, do something to change our circumstances. That means whatever is causing you that stress, you can do something either to remove it or change it. Or, failing that, the next thing you can do is do something to change the way you perceive your circumstances, change the way you interpret your circumstances. And the third one is to change the way you respond to your circumstances. Right? Now, I'll give you a very simple example. Do something to change your circumstances is actually to change the situation so that whatever is stressing you, whatever is hurting you or causing you distress is no longer doing that. Take Simple example, I think many people face that, and I faced that during my professional career. You work for a company, and your boss is not a nice person, let's say. When you do something nice or good, something which helps him, he never says thank you. And if you do something he doesn't like, or you do something against his wishes or his instructions, then he gets angry and he shouts at you. Right? We experience this kind of bosses sometimes, right? We have them. So what can you do when you are having this kind of a boss? What can you do to change your circumstances? What are some of the things you can do? Change your job, huh? But what if that company is a wonderful company? They pay you very well, and your colleagues are wonderful friends. The big boss is a very compassionate person. It's only your immediate boss who is really very nasty. Would you like to change job just because of him? You found such a good job. So now you may not be able or may not be willing to change your circumstances. What's the next thing to do? Change the way you interpret your circumstances to reduce your suffering. So what can you do here? You can't stop him shouting at you, right? Every time you do something he doesn't like or against his wishes or whatever it is that upsets him, he starts to behave in very unwholesome way at you. So how do you change the way you perceive your circumstances? How do you change the way you perceive the way he's shouting at you? Just imagine he is a gorilla that escaped from the zoo. Each time he shouts at you, you just imagine in your mind, this gorilla from the zoo is shouting again. Now, if you think like that, are you going to get hurt by his shouting? No. In fact, you might even smile or laugh. Every time he shouts at you, you laugh back at him because your mind is thinking, this gorilla, there he goes again, So this is one way, you can do that. And if you keep smiling each time he shouts at you, sooner or later he's going to give up. He says, every time I shout at him, this guy keeps smiling. Sooner or later he's going to stop shouting at you. So this is a second way. Now what if that's not easy to do, huh? Then you are left with the third choice. Change the way you respond to your circumstances. And we have an old saying, in Chinese, that you may say terrible things to me, but it's not going to hurt me very much. But if you are very kind to me, I don't know how to respond to you, really. So this is what I'm trying to say. Practice kindness towards your boss. Every time he shouts at you, you just take it, take it without letting it hurt you and just behave in a kind way towards him. Now, if you're kind to him, every time he is angry or upset and you are kind with him, you respond to anger with kindness. Sooner or later, he's going to give up. Every time he gets angry with you, he starts to say, this guy, why is he so nice? Why is he so kind? Sooner or later, he internally will have great difficulty trying to shout and scream at someone who is very kind to him. So these are some of the things you can do. Right? Change your circumstances. If you can't do something to change your circumstances, change the way you perceive your circumstances. And if you can't change the way you perceive your circumstances, then change the way you respond to your circumstances. So these are the three windows of opportunity that Daniel Goleman has explained there. So far, I think I've covered enough on what we can do, how we can help ourselves, the self-help methodology. And one more thing I want to touch on. Sometimes thoughts arise and we don't know whether this is a good thought or not a good thought. Sometimes it's difficult to assess. How can you assess? How can you assess what is destructive thinking and what is constructive thinking? Now, I'll share with you a very simple technique how to discern your thoughts. And this came from the Kalama Sutra. See, one thing about the Kalama Sutra, a lot of people get distracted by the first part of the Kalama Sutra, where the Buddha was saying that don't believe something just because somebody is famous. Don't believe something just because it's written in the books. Don't believe something just because he's very good at explaining it to you, and so on and so forth. There are 10 different things that say to you, don't simply believe because of these things. And then he went on to explain, how can we choose good thoughts from bad thoughts? How can we choose a good belief from an unwholesome belief? And here are 4 things we can use. And this is how we can discern our thoughts. Right? How we can choose positive thoughts and say, is it wholesome or not wholesome? That means, is it free from ill will, free from malicious intent? Right? Wholesome or unwholesome means there is no intention to hurt or harm yourself or to hurt or harm others. That means it's free from ill will and malicious intent. That is wholesome thought. Now, it must qualify all four. The second one is to choose to look at it then, is it blameless? Blameless means when it is something you say or do, does it actually hurt other people? Even though you don't intend it, sometimes you may be telling the truth, but it hurts other people's feeling. Then it is not blameless anymore. If you say something, it is truthful, but it hurts others' feelings, it doesn't help them, then it is not blameless anymore. So blameless means whatever it is you do, it will not cause any hurt or harm or suffering to anybody, yourself or others included. So this is the second criteria. The third criteria is resourcefulness. That means when developed and undertaken, it leads to wellness, peace, happiness of the self and others. That means whatever it is that you choose, it will be helpful. That is an important criteria, that it is helpful in some ways. And finally, the fourth one, right? Do wise people do it? Is this exemplary of wise people? Right? Do they condemn it? Do wise people condemn it? So, whether it is praised or practiced by the wise. Now, the fourth one, whether it is praised or practiced by the wise, very often I get one question, so I answer it before anyone asks. Who are the wise? Now, that's a very common question. So a very simple way of determining who is a wise person. A wise person is a person who always practices the first three. Simple. Which is people who live their lives and it is clearly a wholesome, a blameless and a resourceful life. That they have never carried any ill will or malicious intent. That everything they do or say is blameless. It doesn't hurt anybody. And it is resourceful means everything they do or say can only be helpful. And that is a wise person. And if you meet one of those, learn from him. Follow him. Right? So this is 4 ways of discerning, 4 things you can do, 4 criteria to help you discern your thoughts. What are good thoughts and what are not good thoughts. So I hope today's sharing has been helpful. Let's conclude with a final slide here to look at what we have covered. That emotional excitement will lead to mental proliferation or cognitive distortions. The mind begins to wander off and create thinking that is not helpful. Right? Therefore, you apply these 4 focuses of introspection. The practice of Satipatthana 24/7 to examine how we interpreted our circumstances. And then you also apply the 4 harmonious exercises, Chattari Samapadana, and to abandon unwholesome thoughts and to discern and cultivate wholesome and beneficial thoughts. And finally, to practice this 3-step self-compassion. Pause, relax, and then think in order to cultivate peace and harmony in your life. And with this, I end my sharing. Thank you very much for paying attention. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.